As we've said countless times on this channel, getting the entire auto industry to transition from internal combustion engine vehicles to zero tailpipe emission vehicles is an urgent task that needs to be accomplished in short order as part of humanity's work to mitigate the effects of anthropogenic climate change. Sure, had we acted 20 years ago to make the transition to electric, or rather had mainstream automakers, oil companies and legislators not tried to strangle electric vehicle development out of fear for their bottom line and their shareholders' pockets, we would be in a very different place today. But we're not, because despite our best efforts to exist in that magical alternative universe where EVs have been running around since the dawn of the automobile, we don't live there. We live here. And short of a genius college student and his grumpy British professor, we are kind of stuck here. Although, to cross the science fiction streams there for a second, have you ever wondered if it was we who lived in the alternative timeline? You know, the one where the Terran Empire rises to rule the universe through unbearable cruelty and hatred. Sorry, got sidetracked there. All nerdy jokes aside, however, time has run out for us to dawdle on the transition of the world's fleet to electric vehicles, and that's led some, including me, to get frustrated by the seemingly never-ending parade of high-end luxury plug-in vehicles coming to market, but the relatively slim pickings in the world of truly affordable mainstream vehicles that can replace any number of family hatchbacks, crossovers, and city runabouts. If we want electric vehicles to make an impact on the marketplace, we need as many of these affordable EVs as possible, not to mention legitimate long-term strategies from mainstream automakers and startups alike as to how they're going to continue supporting these vehicles for the 10 to 20 years they'll be on the road after rolling off the production line. We need everything from city hatchbacks and runabouts to long-range family cars, people carriers and minivans, to robust off-roaders and affordable commercial vehicles, not just high-end sports cars or luxury rides for the 1%. And at the same time, we need better public transit and more efficient freight logistics. The industry is, thankfully, getting better in terms of its variety and availability. In Europe, there are legitimately multiple choices for families wanting an affordable hatchback they can go electric with. We're even starting to see small crossovers at reasonable prices that won't break the bank for many consumers. The effect those vehicles will have in displacing traditional fossil-fueled vehicles cannot and should not be overlooked. And with Europe looking to go all electric by 2035, or at least ban all new internal combustion engine vehicle sales by 2035, even sooner in some European countries, we are finally seeing roadmaps appear that show us how this will all be accomplished. But in the US, that roadmap is less sure. And while making affordable family crossovers and company city vehicles with electric drivetrains are just as much as a part of the future of the all-electric fleet, there's something of a far higher importance, getting so-called gasoline superusers to dump the pump for something all-electric, or perhaps hybrid. That's because, as a new report from advocacy group Cultura just detailed, 10% of US drivers are responsible for 32%, nearly one-third, of all gasoline consumption. These drivers, often with full-size SUVs and pickup trucks, drive more than 3 times the national average every year. And because their vehicles tend to be far less efficient, they already consumed more gasoline than your average run-of-the-mill car, which, in the US these days, let's face it, is a mid-size crossover. But because they drive 3 times as further as average, they are responsible for far, far more pollution. You might think that these gasoline superusers come from super rural areas, and you'd be right to some extent. Louisiana, Mississippi and Wyoming top the list of states with the highest numbers of gasoline superusers. But it's not just those who live and work in rural areas. The study highlighted Houston, Texas, Detroit, Michigan and St. Louis, Missouri as being metro areas with the highest number of gasoline superusers in the Union. From a purely mathematical standpoint, getting those gasoline superusers to transition to cleaner, less polluting vehicles could eliminate or severely reduce the equivalent of 45 billion gallons of gasoline consumed every year. And doing so would have a far larger impact on the US's total transportation carbon footprint than getting hybrid owners, for example, to transition to an EV. After all, I think anyone with rudimentary math skills or better can see that reducing someone's gas consumption from 15 miles per gallon to more than 100 miles per gallon equivalent is far more impactful than taking someone who has 60 miles per gallon for their car and getting them to transition to 100 miles per gallon equivalent. Getting a couple thousand pickup truck or SUV drivers to go all electric will displace far more nasty pollutants than a couple thousand Prius owners buying an EV. But how do you go about convincing fans of large gas-guzzling vehicles to make the change? I have some thoughts. Ultimately, this question revolves around a multi-pronged approach that uses both sticks and carrots to encourage customers to switch to cleaner vehicles. It requires gas taxes and disincentives at the point of registration, and it requires incentives and infrastructure developments to help make plug-in ownership as easy as gasoline vehicle ownership. And right now, it still isn't. But it also requires a buy-in from automakers, something that sadly has not always been easy. At the end of the day, all automakers are running a business, and frankly, they'll do whatever makes them the most profit for the least effort. And when it comes to SUVs and pickup trucks, that means making the most powerful gas guzzlers that consumers understand how to refuel, how to drive, and how to fix. I'm going to come to repairability a little later, but let's start with what these super user vehicles actually offer consumers. As I detailed in last week's video on pickup trucks and coal rolling, many people choose pickup trucks because of the sheer power that they're capable of producing. The biggest trucks can tow anything, go anywhere, and have bucket loads of room inside for driver and passengers. They can handle abuse on the farm, can be used to haul work supplies, and they tackle winter weather with aplomb because most trucks these days have exceptional ground clearance and all-wheel drive, not to mention big chunky tyres capable of putting all that power onto the road. And then there's the often incorrect assumption that many car buyers have, that the bigger the vehicle, the safer it is. So many customers, especially in areas of the country where the nearest town is a couple of hours away, or where extreme weather means riding high and dry is considered essential, pick the vehicle that offers them the most flexibility of use, the most comfort on a long trip, and the most durability. We're now seeing automakers bring full-size electric pickups and SUVs into the spotlight. Tesla has its Cybertruck, Rivian have its R1T and R1S, and Ford, General Motors and Stellantis are all bringing at least one pickup and SUV to market in the next year or two with an electric drivetrain. Some, GM comes to mind, are working on multiple vehicles. Tesla and Rivian's vehicles are honestly marketed less at work users than other brands, and while I'm sure a significant proportion of these super users who drive big gas-guzzling vehicles don't actually need a lot of heavy-duty work from their vehicles, there's also an image thing that Tesla and Rivian bring to the table that I think some pickup and SUV owners, I'm guessing, wouldn't want to be associated with, because both of those brands haven't been associated with heavy-duty manly work vehicles. The Cybertruck is polarizing enough in its design that it's been scoffed at by many traditional pickup fans, and that's something that Elon Musk recently alluded to on Twitter. Meanwhile, Rivian? Well, it's not exactly well known outside of the EV world, as a recent study into pickup truck opinions showed, because it's focused primarily on advertising to EV fans and those who want to use their pickup as a lifestyle vehicle rather than a work truck. And that's despite it featuring in Long Way Up as a competent truck that has more than demonstrated its capabilities on and off-road. Before we move on from the trucks coming to market, I should probably acknowledge startups like Lordstown and Atlas, who, while we all here at the channel are now extremely doubtful about their prospects based on our years of working in the industry, might also bring products to market that fit the same use case scenario as those gasoline and diesel vehicles that super users are driving today. Both of those vehicles are aimed at more work-oriented use cases. In last week's video on pickups, I talked about how some of the electrified trucks coming to market will offer significant benefits for those who use their vehicles for light work-related duties. I talked about the Ford F-150 Lightning Pro, a vehicle which is designed for work use but has some unique selling points and features like onboard power and vehicle-to-home that current gasoline and diesel trucks don't. I'm guessing the upcoming Ram 1500 electric and Chevy Silverado EV, which we know very little about sadly, will offer similar features in order to be competitive against Ford. And let's not forget the Tesla Cybertruck, while lacking in vehicle-to-home capabilities, does also have power outlets to run tools or accessories, just like the Rivian R1T does. And I also talked in that video about the instant torque and power available from electric drivetrains, noting that there's more instant power and torque available than all but the most powerful of diesel trucks. For short-haul driving and owner-operators who use their trucks for work purposes, there's frankly already big incentives to switching to an EV, provided the owner knows and understands how these trucks differ from ICE trucks. I also discussed in that video how we're seeing the transition taking place already, with Ford deciding to stop selling its diesel F-150 Power Stroke due to the overwhelming popularity the hybrid F-150 Power Boost is currently enjoying. It uses less gasoline, has more power, and saves owners money in the long term, but still offers enough familiarity that truck owners aren't left feeling that they need something completely new and different to learn. And of course, it dramatically improves fuel economy, which means less nasty stuff gets spewed out of exhausts. It's a step in the right direction. At this point, let's take a side note to those who do have massive gas-guzzling SUVs and pickups, those SuperUsers. They're called SuperUsers because they're driving 3 times further than most average Americans and using a butt-ton more gasoline because they drive an inefficient vehicle. Frankly, even getting them to go hybrid with their next vehicle choice and the efficiency gains that come with that would make a massive difference. But we are talking about breaking their habit completely, going all in on electric. And for that, I think some things are going to need to happen, things that go beyond the obvious benefits of instant torque and impressive acceleration. The first one is obviously charging. I know, most people charge at home, etc, etc, etc. But if you're a super user of a gas-guzzling SUV or pickup, you're used to turning up at a gas station, filling up and then moving on. The gas is cheap and you are happy to pay for it. In order for those people to feel happy about switching to an EV, we need charging stations to be as easy and as ubiquitous as gas pumps to use. And we need to have a discussion about electricity as a fuel, which we haven't. One that's free of technical terms, one that gives people a realistic yardstick by which to measure how quickly their vehicle will refuel and how far it will travel. You know, like ChargeWay and its colour-coded answer to EV charging. And the slogan, the higher the number, the faster the charge. And yeah, ChargeWay doesn't mention kilowatts or kilowatt hours because, I mean, honestly, how many of you watching this who aren't self-confessed EV nerds honestly know or even care what a kilowatt hour is and what a kilowatt is? Right now, charging networks aren't there. We're seeing them develop slowly, and the news this week that Tesla is interested in opening up its charging network to competing vehicles is certainly an interesting and positive development. But I don't think that will happen overnight, and I'm guessing that there will be some caveats to it, which I'm going to come into in a video later this week. Luckily, most new EVs coming to market are from companies that are aware that charging time is important to future EV adoption. So we're seeing faster and more capable onboard chargers, faster DC quick charging capability, and longer-legged battery packs that should keep those long-range road warriors who are currently driving super users happy. There will, of course, be a core group who will refuse to spend 20 minutes charging every couple of hours. But here's where incentives come in. Because if, as I suspect, most of the people in the super user group are using their vehicles for business purposes, even if it's just cross-state trips to meetings, bottom line calculations matter. Even if that business doesn't require a massive SUV or a pickup, US federal tax law allows businesses to write off the purchase of massive SUVs and pickup trucks over £8,000 gross vehicle weight. That incentivizes people to go with the company vehicles that are larger, not smaller, and less, not more efficient. And that is a loophole legislation that needs to be changed. And no, I'm not talking about restricting who can and can't buy massive vehicles. I'm talking about making such write-offs dependent on choosing a fuel-efficient vehicle. Again, to loop back to what I said earlier, even getting someone to go hybrid with their massive gas-guzzling SUV or pickup will have a far higher impact than someone going from a hybrid to an EV, at least in case of total emissions. Next, as unpopular as I think it will be, we need heavier taxes on polluting vehicles, especially with new vehicle sales. Be it a form of higher gas tax or a registration surcharge, those who are buying heavily polluting and heavily consuming vehicles should be asked to pay for that extra consumption. Some people watching this will, I'm sure, argue that this is un-American or undemocratic, but in Europe, many countries have been charging surcharges and taxes on heavy polluting vehicles for years, while simultaneously offering incentives and perks to plug-in vehicle owners. It's why Norway has managed to transition so much of the nation's fleet to electric. Norway hasn't got access to some super extra top secret special EVs. It just made owning plug-in vehicles an economic no-brainer. And no, not everyone in Norway drives a Tesla. And yes, people have electric work vehicles in Norway too. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Norway's EV transition has been paid for by a massive sovereign wealth fund established through the profits of North Sea oil exploration. That is true. And of course, the US and many other countries around the world don't have access to such funds. But many countries in the world, including the US, offer trillions of dollars every year in the form of subsidies and write-offs to the fossil fuel industry. Transitioning the world's energy systems to more renewable and sustainable sources of energy should include incentivizing EV transitions, as well as allowing those who can generate the power they need for their new vehicles at home the chance to do so with economic benefits. Most people, when faced with two choices, will pick the one that's more affordable, assuming a reasonably even playing field in all other aspects. Finally, automakers need to be better about repairability and parts availability. I get it. High voltage EV components aren't things you should mess about with. But we've been okay with enthusiasts working on gasoline engines for years. We've been okay with people working with high current arc welding gear. And we've been okay with people working with heavy, dangerous farm equipment and shop tools. Many folks who own and use massive gas-guzzling vehicles and are super users do so because of the status and because they can. But there are others who own these vehicles because of their utility and because they know they can work on them and get parts for them when they go wrong. Right now, electric vehicles aren't easily fixable for those who aren't electrical engineers because automakers haven't made their vehicles easy to work on. They've hidden everything behind software and user agreements and special tools. But hopefully, at least in the US, President Biden's push towards a right to repair legislation could change that, giving those who want the essential information and tools they need access to safely work on their own vehicles. Edge cases will always be there, such as those who need to tow £20,000 cross-country every other week. But I'm guessing that for the majority of these gasoline super users, it's possible to break their habit. What do you think? That's it for today. Please do hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't yet, as it should make sure that you don't miss out on our videos. And do the same to our other two channels, Transport Evolved Take 2, and if you're in a hurry, Transport Evolved Shorts. Thanks on behalf of the entire TE crew go out to the folks on my right for being our $15 to $49 a month Patreon supporters. Special thanks to our $50 a month patrons. That's Andrew Martin, Guido Drahoa, Brophy Wolf, Anonymous Freak, Regine Fellows, Carl Hodgson, Gordon C., Paul Conway, Laura Sanborn, Anthony Coates, Denny Hyde, Sean Ueda, and Tesla in the Gong. And our deepest gratitude to our $100 a month Patreon supporters, John Lyons, Marcel Ward, Reggie Watts, JP Fagerback, Will Graylin, and Ian. If you'd like to join the ranks of wonderful supporters, you'll find links below to Patreon and Ko-fi. You can chat with the team and TE fans over at Discord. And don't forget to check out our swag store. It's very cool and you can get cool stuff like the t-shirt that I'm wearing today. Thanks for joining me, and as always, keep evolving.